You feel your body tighten at the exact moment nothing is being demanded of you. Someone remembers what matters to you, offers help before you ask, and does not turn the gesture into a debt. Yet your shoulders rise, your breath becomes careful. Before gratitude can settle, your mind begins searching for what you should give back, as if unearned love has arrived carrying a cost that has not yet named itself. You may have mistaken this reaction for mistrust, ingratitude, or proof that you are not ready for a good relationship. You may even feel ashamed because the person before you has done nothing wrong. They are patient, their care is steady. Still, the warmth that should soften you makes your chest become still, because care without a task leaves you exposed in a way that hardship rarely did. Difficulty was familiar because it gave you a position. When someone was overwhelmed, distant, confused, or wounded, you knew how to enter the bond. You listened, interpreted, anticipated, and carried what they could not hold. Love became legible through effort. You did not have to wonder why you belonged, because the answer was visible in everything you were doing for the other person. Then someone arrives who does not need to be repaired in order to remain close. They ask what you want and wait for the real answer. They notice your fatigue without making you defend it. They offer tenderness before you have proved your usefulness. The absence of struggle should feel like relief, yet the reaction arrives first. Your jaw tightens because the familiar entrance into love has disappeared. What unsettles you is not care itself. It is care that does not allow you to hide inside competence. Giving placed you slightly ahead of the moment. You could observe the other person, adjust to them, and decide how much of yourself the relationship could safely contain. Receiving reverses that direction. Now attention is moving toward you, and there is no useful role between your inner life and the person who wants to know it. This is why simple kindness can feel more intimate than dramatic confession. A person brings you something small because they thought of you, and suddenly you feel watched. They ask how the difficult appointment went, and you answer too quickly that it was fine. They make space for your preference, and you say that anything will do. The body contracts where the old performance has nowhere to go. You are not necessarily afraid that the kindness is false. Sometimes the deeper fear is that it may be real. False care can eventually be explained, predicted, and placed within an old understanding. Real care asks something stranger. It asks you to remain present while another person gives, without earning the moment, controlling its meaning, or escaping into immediate repayment. The empathic position often appears generous because it is generous. Your attention is real. Your sensitivity is real. Your ability to notice what others miss may have brought genuine comfort to people you loved. Yet generosity can acquire a second function. It can become the place from which you manage closeness, ensuring that you are valuable before anyone has the chance to decide whether your unperformed self is welcome. That is the first reversal. The tightening is not simply resistance to love. It may be the loss of the method by which you once made love predictable. When care had to be earned, you knew the exchange. Effort produced approval. Understanding produced access. Endurance preserved connection. Love without that sequence removes the rules, and what looks like safety to another person can feel like standing without protection. In ordinary moments, this can be almost invisible. You clean before someone visits even when they have told you not to. You insist on paying after they have invited you. You answer their vulnerable story with one of your own only after making sure theirs has been fully held. You call this consideration, but beneath it may be a quiet refusal to owe anyone the vulnerable experience of simply being cared for. The refusal does not feel like refusal. It feels responsible. It feels fair. It feels like the decent wish not to burden another person. Yet the speed matters. Your hand reaches for the bill before desire has spoken. Your mouth offers reassurance before disappointment has formed. The repayment begins before you have received what was offered, which means the care never fully reaches the part of you that needed it. You remain loved in theory and untouched in practice. People may be devoted to you, but every gesture is quickly converted into balance. Every kindness is answered. Every accommodation corrected. Every moment of dependence shortened. Nothing is allowed to remain uneven long enough for trust to deepen. The relationship looks mutual from the outside, while inside you are still making sure that no one carries you for more than a moment. Mutuality is not perfect equality at every exchange. It requires movement. One person gives while the other receives. Then life changes direction later without a ledger controlling the bond. For you, that movement may feel dangerously loose. If love is not measured by usefulness, you cannot secure it through effort. You must encounter the possibility that another person stays because your existence matters to them, and that is harder to control. Control may sound like a harsh word for something so tender, but it belongs here without accusation. Giving allowed you to influence the emotional weather. You could reduce conflict, anticipate need, and prevent disappointment before it became visible. This did not make your care dishonest. It meant care also protected you from the helplessness of needing something another person was free to give or withhold. Receiving places you before that freedom. The person can see your need and respond, but they remain separate from you. They are not an extension of your vigilance. They cannot be managed into perfect reliability. A steady relationship does not remove this uncertainty. It makes it more visible, because you can no longer explain your tension as a reasonable response to constant inconsistency. The old interpretation says you tighten because something must be wrong with the love. The deeper recognition is more uncomfortable. Something may be right with it, and your established way of belonging does not know how to live there. The body is not rejecting the person. It is bracing for a familiar transaction that never begins. Then, mistaking the absence of that transaction for danger through a Jungian lens, an old complex is active when the present is organized by an emotional rule formed elsewhere. It does not wait for conscious permission. A caring gesture enters the room, but the reaction interprets it through an older equation. To receive is to owe. To need is to surrender position. To be loved without performing is to become visible before value has been proven. That equation may not have begun in one dramatic event. It can grow through years of praise for being easy, perceptive, capable, and considerate. It can strengthen in adult relationships where your usefulness is welcomed more quickly than your uncertainty. Repetition teaches the same lesson without anyone speaking it aloud. Connection becomes safest when you arrive already carrying something the other person needs. Eventually, you stop noticing that you are earning what others seem able to receive. You remember birthdays, soften difficult truths, make room, stay composed, and ask thoughtful questions. When attention turns toward you, however, you become vague. You describe facts without revealing impact. You offer a polished version of pain that requires no response. Even disclosure becomes another way of remaining undemanding. This is not a lack of depth, it is depth under supervision. You may feel intensely while allowing others to encounter only what you have already organized. Their care is permitted after you have translated the feeling, reduced its weight, and made it easy to hold. Spontaneous tenderness interrupts that supervision. It reaches toward what has not yet been made presentable, and the muscles tighten around the unfinished truth. Perhaps someone says that you do not have to explain. Instead of relief, you feel a brief emptiness. Explanation was not only communication. It was the price you paid to make need reasonable. If you could show why you were tired, why you were hurt, or why you needed space, then care might be justified. Being met before the case is proven can feel almost indecent. The strangeness deepens when the person enjoys giving to you. You watch their face for strain, resentment, or the first sign that generosity has become obligation. When none appears, you may search harder. You offer them an exit they did not request. You minimize what they did. You say it was no trouble, even though the trouble they willingly took is exactly what moved you. What you call protecting them may partly be protection from your own dependence. If their care matters, then they matter in a way that cannot be reduced to appreciation. Their absence could hurt. Their inconsistency could disappoint you. Receiving does not merely create comfort, it acknowledges attachment, and attachment places something living beyond the reach of your competence. That is why love without earning can produce both longing and contraction. One part of you has wanted this ordinary tenderness for years. Another part knows that wanting it removes the shelter of self-sufficiency. Your shoulders do not lift because you feel nothing. They lift because something precious is close enough to matter, and you have no familiar task with which to disguise how much. There is also grief inside the kindness. A person treats your need as ordinary, and you suddenly sense how much effort once surrounded every request. They do not punish your tiredness, and the relief reveals how often you prepared to defend it. Present care illuminates old deprivation without needing to describe the past. The gift hurts partly because it shows that receiving could have been simpler. You may respond by finding a flaw in the relationship. Calm becomes lack of passion. Reliability becomes predictability. A person who asks little of you may seem less compelling than someone whose distance keeps your attention occupied. This does not mean you secretly want mistreatment. It means intensity once gave your sensitivity a purpose, while steadiness asks that sensitivity to become something other than constant preparation. The new capacity is not merely learning to accept compliments or let someone pay for dinner. It is allowing affection to exist without immediately converting it into duty. It is staying in the moment after another person has given. While the impulse to restore the old balance moves through you, nothing dramatic happens. Yet for a person organized around earning, That pause can feel psychologically enormous. You begin to notice how quickly love becomes work in your hands. A caring message becomes a reminder to respond perfectly. A favor becomes a future obligation. Someone remembering you becomes pressure to be unforgettable to them. The tightening is the instant tenderness is translated into performance, because performance is the language in which closeness has long felt safest. Still, the person before you may not be asking for that translation. They may be offering care without secretly assigning a role. This does not guarantee that every gesture is pure or every relationship secure. It only reveals that your body can prepare for a bargain even when no bargain has been proposed. The past does not need to repeat in order for its rules to enter the present. So the difficulty is more precise than fear of love. You know how to love when love gives you work. You know how to stay when staying requires perception, patience, and emotional labor. What remains unfamiliar is being chosen while your hands are empty. The tightening belongs to a deeper structure, one that learned to trust effort before affection and usefulness before mutuality. Once usefulness became the safer form of belonging, it did not remain confined to moments of obvious need. It began organizing how you entered almost every relationship. You noticed what was missing and quietly supplied it. You became attentive before anyone asked, agreeable before conflict appeared, and dependable before another person had decided what they were willing to offer you in return. This gave you a remarkable social fluency. You could sense where another person felt uncertain and help them feel understood. You could enter tense situations without adding weight. At work, you became the one who remembered what others overlooked. In friendship, you made room for difficult feelings. In love, you often became valuable before you became visible. The distinction matters because value and visibility can resemble each other for a long time. People thanked you, trusted you, and reached for you. Their reliance created warmth, and the warmth felt like evidence that the bond was real. Yet reliance answered a different question. It proved that your function mattered. It did not always reveal whether your unguarded needs, limits, and preferences could occupy the same relationship. Usefulness protected you from having to ask that question directly. If you arrived with something to offer, rejection became less likely and less clear. Someone might fail to know you, but they would still need what you provided. Someone might avoid your inner life, but they could remain attached to your steadiness. The role preserved connection even when mutual recognition was uncertain. This is why the arrangement survived. It did not survive because you enjoyed exhaustion or wanted unequal relationships. It survived because it worked. It gave you a reliable way to become welcome. The care you offered often produced gratitude, closeness, and a sense of moral clarity. You knew who you were when another person felt better because you had been there. Being the giver also placed you on the side of strength. Need could remain on the other side of the relationship, contained in the person you were helping. You could approach vulnerability without admitting how much of your own was present. Their distress gave your tenderness somewhere to go, while your private longing stayed hidden inside the very competence everyone admired. In Jungian terms, this is one way a persona becomes mistaken for the whole person. the persona is not a lie. Your patience, sensitivity, and reliability are genuine parts of you. The difficulty begins when these qualities become the only acceptable entrance into connection. A living capacity hardens into a requirement, and eventually you cannot tell whether you are giving freely or securing your place. Others may reinforce this without intending harm. They call you thoughtful, strong, calming, or unusually understanding. They tell you that they do not know what they would do without you. The praise feels affectionate, and much of it is. Yet each compliment can quietly return you to the same assignment. Continue being the person whose needs never interrupt the comfort you create. Over time, even your choices begin to form around that assignment. You choose the restaurant that suits everyone else. You accept work because the team depends on you. You stay in conversations after your attention has emptied. None of these decisions seems significant alone. Together, they build a life in which belonging repeatedly arrives after self-adjustment. The cost is not only fatigue. Fatigue can be noticed and sometimes repaired. The deeper cost is that desire loses practice. When someone asks what you want, you may honestly not know. Preference has spent so long waiting for the needs of others to become clear that it no longer speaks at ordinary volume. You hear it only after resentment, withdrawal, or sudden exhaustion has made silence impossible. Receiving care enters this structure as a disruption. It does not simply add something pleasant to your life. It removes the familiar sequence by which you locate yourself. If another person contributes before you have become indispensable, then usefulness can no longer explain why you are there. The relationship begins asking whether you can belong without first becoming necessary. That question reaches beyond romance. A colleague offers to finish something for you, and your first response is to explain why you can still manage it. A friend asks what would make the week easier, and you redirect the conversation toward their problems. Someone gives you time, attention, or practical help, and you immediately search for a future moment in which you can restore your stronger position. You may call this independence, but independence is not always what is happening. Genuine independence allows help without treating it as humiliation. What appears here is a protected balance in which you remain the person least likely to need more than others can give. The aim is not freedom from people, it is freedom from being caught wanting something they may not provide. The old role therefore controls disappointment before disappointment occurs. If you rarely ask, another person rarely has the chance to refuse. If you repay quickly, they cannot later accuse you of taking too much. If you carry the heavier share, you do not have to discover whether they would notice your struggle without instruction. Giving becomes a way of limiting the evidence that could hurt you. This protection has a hidden consequence. It also limits the evidence that could surprise you. The person who might respond with care never meets the full request. The friend who might willingly remain beside your uncertainty receives only the edited version. You avoid finding out who would disappoint you, but you also avoid finding out who might be capable of loving you beyond your usefulness. The structure is intelligent because it prevents both extremes. It reduces the risk of open rejection while also preventing complete dependence on another person. You remain connected but never entirely surrendered to the bond. You can love deeply while preserving an internal exit. The belief that if the relationship changes, you will still know how to function because you were carrying most of it already. That internal exit may be invisible even to you. You do not think of yourself as guarded. You share stories, offer affection, and show up consistently. Yet there are forms of openness that never place anything essential where another person can hold it. You may reveal what happened without revealing what you hope they will do. You may describe pain while making it clear that no response is required. This is where emotional generosity can conceal distance. You seem available because you are present for so much. Still, the movement of intimacy travels mostly in one direction. Others are permitted to affect you only after their influence has been interpreted and controlled. Their care is welcomed as appreciation, but resisted when it asks you to lean, wait, trust, or remain uncertain. The pattern repeats because every repetition confirms its logic. People grow accustomed to your competence and offer less. You notice their reduced effort and conclude that expecting care was unrealistic. Then you become even more capable, which teaches them that you require little. What began as protection gradually creates the very absence it was designed to prevent. No single person needs to be blamed for this. Some people take what is offered because they assume it is freely given. Some genuinely believe your quick refusal of help. Others are relieved to let you manage what they find difficult. The relationship develops around the version of you that appears most consistently, while the unexpressed part waits for recognition that no one has been shown how to provide. Resentment can emerge here without an obvious offender. You may feel alone while surrounded by people who believe they are close to you. You may wish someone would insist, notice, or look beneath the competent answer. At the same time, when someone does insist, your chest tightens and you tell them that everything is handled. The longing and the refusal begin serving the same structure. This contradiction is painful because both sides are sincere. You genuinely want to be cared for. You also genuinely experience receiving as a loss of position. One part longs for mutuality, while another has learned that the safer partner is the one who needs less. The conflict is not between love and coldness. It is between being held and remaining protected from what being held makes possible. Being held makes gratitude possible, but it also makes grief possible. It exposes how tired you are. It shows that some burdens were never proof of strength, only burdens no one interrupted. It allows the thought that you might have deserved companionship before becoming exceptional at carrying yourself. The care offered now can touch years that were organized around not expecting it. For this reason, you may prefer care in forms that leave your identity intact. Compliments are easier when they praise what you did. Affection is easier when it follows your patience. Help is easier when circumstances make it unavoidable. These forms preserve the old explanation. You receive because you earned, endured, or finally became tired enough to justify what should have required no defense. Unearned love removes that justification. It says that your ordinary presence can create attachment, even when you are not soothing, fixing, or proving. This sounds gentle, but it threatens an entire moral economy. If love can arrive before usefulness, then much of the labor you treated as the price of belonging may never have been the price. It may have been the method that kept uncertainty under control. That recognition can bring quiet anger not necessarily at another person, but at the years spent maintaining a contract no one had formally written. You may see how often you offered more than was asked, then silently hoped the excess would make you unforgettable. You may remember every time appreciation briefly resembled the secure devotion you could not request directly. The anger does not cancel your generosity. It separates the gift from the bargain hidden beneath it. Some of what you gave was love, some was fear translated into service. Often the two were intertwined so closely that neither could be named alone. The task now is not to condemn the giver, but to recognize why giving became the only position from which tenderness felt safe. When a steady person offers care, they unknowingly meet this whole architecture. They may think they are making dinner, listening carefully, or remembering what matters to you. Your reaction is answering something larger. It is answering the possibility that the role could loosen, that another person might contribute without taking your freedom, and that dependence may not always end in debt. Still, the role does not loosen simply because the relationship is kind. Kindness can actually make the old structure more visible. You may become restless, overly helpful, or eager to create a problem you know how to solve. If nothing needs repair, you may wonder what keeps you important. Calm love offers no emergency in which your value can become undeniable, and so the unfamiliar question remains beneath every generous gesture. If you stop earning your place, what allows you to believe that the place is still yours? The old answer was effort, and effort rarely failed to give you something solid to do. Love is asking for a different answer now, but the part of you built around usefulness does not yet know what that answer could be. The absence of an old answer does not immediately create a new one. It creates a pause, and the pause can feel unbearable. Someone offers to carry part of what you have been holding, and for a moment you do nothing. Your fingers become restless. Your mind produces reasons to refuse. Without the familiar movement toward usefulness, you feel as though you have failed to maintain the bond. The old role feels absent before any new belonging feels dependable. This is where receiving becomes more difficult than it appeared from a distance. It is not a single act of saying yes, it is remaining inside the unevenness that follows. Another person has given time, effort, or tenderness, and the balance has not yet been restored. The old arrangement interprets this openness as exposure, even when the relationship interprets it as ordinary closeness. You accepted the gesture, but not yet fully accepted the meaning it carries. You may accept the help and still prevent yourself from receiving it. Gratitude becomes apology. Relief becomes a promise to repay. The kindness enters your practical life, but never reaches your sense of worth. You let someone finish the task, yet spend the whole time proving that you could have done it alone. The burden is shared, while the identity built around carrying remains untouched. The body shows how precise the conflict has become. Your shoulders may drop for a second, then lift again when you notice the relief. Your stomach tightens after you disclose something you needed to say. You replay the conversation, searching for the moment when you asked too much. Nothing has gone wrong, but the absence of punishment does not yet feel like evidence of safety. Instead, it can feel like a delay. Part of you waits for the hidden invoice. Perhaps they will mention the favor during an argument. Perhaps their patience will turn into resentment. Perhaps the tenderness was an investment in future access. You prepare for a consequence that may never come, because anticipation once felt safer than being surprised by what generosity later demanded. This anticipation can make steady love seem strangely incomplete. When no consequence appears, you do not always relax. You may become more watchful. The old pattern understands tension better than generosity without leverage. A difficult person made your vigilance feel intelligent. A caring person leaves that vigilance without an obvious object. And unused vigilance can begin inventing one. You notice a change in tone that may mean nothing. You interpret tiredness as withdrawal. You examine a delayed reply for proof that the care has ended. The sensitive attention, once directed toward obvious need, now searches for hidden reversal. You are not trying to create misery. You are trying to restore a world in which every emotional shift can be anticipated and managed. Calm love, therefore, confronts you with a new kind of helplessness. You cannot earn permanence. You cannot understand another person so completely that they lose the freedom to change. You cannot perform enough goodness to eliminate the ordinary uncertainty of attachment. Mutuality offers companionship, but it does not offer control, and the body may tighten around that difference. The old role promised something love itself could never promise. It suggested that if you were attentive enough, useful enough, and undemanding enough, you could prevent abandonment through excellence. This promise was never fully true, yet it gave effort a direction. Unearned love removes the illusion without removing the human risk. You are cared for, but you are not made invulnerable. Here the shadow enters through the virtue of giving. Your generosity did not only conceal need, it sometimes concealed a wish to remain indispensable. If another person depended on your emotional labor, your place felt protected. You could tell yourself that you were simply loving them, while another part quietly relied on their dependence as evidence that they would not leave. This does not make your care manipulative. It reveals that care can carry more than one motive. You wanted their life to become easier, and you wanted your presence to become difficult to replace. The second wish may have been too uncomfortable to admit because it did not fit the identity of the selfless giver, so it disappeared into greater devotion and called itself loyalty. Being needed can provide a form of certainty that being loved cannot. Need has visible proof. People call, request, depend, and return. Love is less measurable. It may remain present during silence. It may exist when nothing is required. For someone trained to recognize value through function, this quieter bond can feel weaker even when it is more mutual. You may then feel drawn toward relationships that make your role obvious. A person with constant difficulties gives your sensitivity immediate purpose. Their inconsistency keeps your attention occupied. Their gratitude, when it comes, feels intense because it follows labor. By contrast, someone capable of caring for themselves may leave you wondering what part you are meant to play. The attraction is not necessarily to suffering. It is to legibility. You know how to recognize love when it appears as responsibility. You may not yet recognize it when it appears as shared time, easy affection, or interest that asks for no rescue. The quiet relationship can seem emotionally pale because it does not activate the identity through which intensity once became meaningful. This is the shadow reversal that steady love makes difficult to avoid. You were not only deprived of care, you also became invested in the position that deprivation created. The giver role protected dignity, reduced uncertainty, and made you morally certain of your place. Without that height, you must meet the other person as an equal. There can be grief in losing that authority. You may have respected yourself for carrying what others could not. You may have survived difficult years by becoming the person who always found a way. When someone now says that you do not have to do everything alone, the words touch both exhaustion and pride. Relief arrives beside a feeling that something admirable is being taken from you. Nothing admirable needs to be erased. The capacity to care, endure, and notice remains yours. What begins to weaken is the compulsion to use those capacities as proof that you deserve a place. Yet compulsion often feels like character after years of repetition. Loosening it can feel less like freedom and more like becoming unreliable, selfish, or ordinary. Ordinary may be the most difficult word. Unearned love does not ask you to be extraordinary enough to justify tenderness. It meets you when you are distracted, uncertain, unproductive, or unable to offer much. This can feel almost insulting to the identity that spent years becoming exceptional at deserving what another person is now giving without an examination. You may test the care without knowing that you are testing it. You apologize repeatedly and watch whether they become tired of reassuring you. You refuse help until they insist, then use their insistence as proof that the offer was sincere. You reveal a small need and monitor their response before allowing a larger one to exist. Trust is measured through trials that the other person does not know they are taking. Sometimes the test works against what you want. A caring person may respect your refusal and step back. You then feel the old disappointment return. They did not insist, so perhaps they did not truly care, yet they may have believed your no. The role that once protected you has created a painful double message. Do not help me, and prove your love by seeing that I did not mean it. Recognizing this can bring shame, but shame is not the deepest truth. The pattern developed because direct need once felt more dangerous than indirect hope. You learned to make care prove itself without openly asking for proof. The method protected you from a clear refusal, but it also required others to interpret a language you had designed around concealment. Mutuality asks for a more exposed language. It asks you to let a request be a request, not a test of whether someone can read what you hide. It asks you to hear an offer without immediately suspecting a future claim. This is not a simple communication lesson. It changes the position from which you have understood dignity, love, and emotional safety. The change appears in moments too small to look transformative. You let someone bring the meal and do not list everything you will do for them later. You answer a caring question with one honest sentence instead of a polished summary. You notice the impulse to make yourself easy, but the impulse does not complete the entire movement. Nothing has been mastered. The pause contains a choice that did not exist before. Remaining does not feel peaceful at first. Your mind may continue producing repayment plans. Your chest may still become rigid when attention stays on you. The difference is only that the reaction is no longer mistaken for a command. This is not comfort yet. It is the first ability to stay close while discomfort tells you to disappear. Through a depth psychology perspective, this is where unconscious repetition begins to lose some authority. The pattern is not defeated. It is interrupted long enough to be observed. You can feel the old equation forming. Care means debt. Need means weakness. Receiving means loss of control. Yet another possibility remains in the room beside it. Even before you fully trust that possibility is not that every person is safe. Discernment does not disappear when the role loosens. Some gestures do carry expectations. Some people do use generosity to create obligation. The difference is that you no longer need to treat every offer as identical. You can begin to notice what the actual relationship contains instead of letting the old bargain decide before evidence arrives. This may be harder than refusing everyone. Refusal creates clarity. Receiving requires distinction, patience, and the willingness to remain uncertain. You must discover who respects limits after giving, who allows your no to remain intact, and who can care without making care a claim. The old pattern preferred one universal rule because one rule prevented surprise. Steady love offers no such universal protection. It offers repeated ordinary evidence, then leaves you free to decide what that evidence means. It may remember your preference, keep a promise, or remain kind after you cannot be useful. Each moment is small. For once, affection gathers meaning through repetition instead of proving itself through intensity. The challenge does not remove the tightening. Sometimes it makes the tightening more noticeable because you are no longer rushing to cancel it through service. You feel the urge to repay and allow the urge to remain unfinished. You feel the fear of owing and observe that no demand follows. The new capacity begins as this modest separation between reaction and obedience. Love without earning still feels unfamiliar, but it can no longer be dismissed as weakness, naivety, or loss of judgment. The body contracts because an old form of protection is being asked to loosen without any guarantee. Yet for brief moments, you remain where care can reach you, with nothing in your hands and no performance standing between you and the bond. Care remains present long enough to become a different kind of evidence. That different evidence begins changing ordinary life before it changes how you describe yourself. Someone offers to drive you somewhere, and you notice the refusal preparing itself. This time, you do not answer immediately. The pause is barely visible to them, but within it, an old sequence fails to complete. Care is allowed to remain an offer long enough for your actual preference to appear. For once, the answer can come from desire rather than defense alone. Sometimes the preference is still no. Receiving does not mean surrendering judgment or accepting every gesture. The difference lies in what creates the answer. You may decline because the help does not suit you, not because accepting would make you weak. You may say yes because the offer is welcome, not because the other person insisted until your defenses became proof of their devotion. This distinction gives the relationship more reality. The other person no longer has to guess whether your refusal conceals a wish to be pursued. They can trust the answer they receive. You also begin trusting yourself to revise an answer without shame. Mutuality becomes less dependent on silent tests. For the first time, Clarity itself becomes a form of care. Nothing has to be hidden for tenderness to remain intact. The first changes may confuse those who know you as endlessly capable. A colleague offers assistance and is surprised when you accept. A friend asks whether you need anything and hears a specific response instead of polite dismissal. Their surprise reveals how consistently you taught others that care could move toward you only after every alternative had been exhausted. Some people respond warmly. They seem relieved to contribute because your competence had sometimes made them feel unnecessary. They cared for you, but could rarely find a place for that care to land. What you experienced as protecting them from burden may have prevented them from participating fully in the bond. Your self-sufficiency kept you safe, but it also kept their generosity at a distance. This recognition complicates the old story. You were not always surrounded by people who refused to give. Some had stopped offering because every offer was quickly declined, minimized, or repaid. They may have believed they were respecting your strength. They may even have felt rejected by the speed with which you erased the small dependence that allows affection to become shared life. Their distance may have adapted to the boundary you never named. Others will be less comfortable. They valued the arrangement in which your needs remained light and your availability remained dependable. When you no longer rush to carry everything, they may call you distracted or changed. Their response does not prove that they never cared. It may show that affection and convenience had become intertwined, and neither of you had been required to separate them. You may feel the old guilt when their disappointment appears. Your mouth prepares an explanation. You want to reassure them that you are still generous, still thoughtful, still the person they have always known. Yet proving this would require returning to the same excess that made receiving impossible. The body tightens because belonging once depended on restoring comfort before anyone could question your goodness. This time, the discomfort may remain unresolved. You do not become cold. You do not punish anyone for having relied on what you repeatedly offered. You simply begin noticing whether a relationship can adjust when your usefulness is no longer constant. Some bonds become more honest, some become quieter. The outcome belongs to the bond, not to a verdict about your worth. The loss can hurt even when the change is necessary. Being needed gave many relationships rhythm and purpose. Without constant requests, you may wonder whether closeness is fading. A silent phone can feel like evidence that you mattered only through service. Yet, it can also create the first unclaimed space in which someone might contact you for your company rather than your capacity. That space does not immediately feel full. You may miss the intensity of being necessary. You may miss knowing exactly what to do. Reconstruction often begins with less emotional certainty, not more. The old role produced immediate proof of value. A mutual bond grows through quieter evidence, conversation without rescue, shared pleasure without crisis, and presence that does not need a problem to justify it. At first, such moments can seem almost empty. Someone sits beside you without asking for guidance. A meal passes without confession. Repair or emotional labor. You may search for the deeper purpose of the evening and fail to find one. Slowly, you recognize that nothing is missing. The relationship is not inactive. It is existing without requiring either person to become a function. Your sensitivity begins changing inside this quieter form. It does not disappear, and it does not become indifference. You still notice tone, fatigue, and hesitation. The difference is that noticing no longer automatically assigns you a task. Another person can be disappointed without becoming your emergency. They can struggle without your value, depending on how quickly you restore them. This allows empathy to become more accurate. When every emotion called you into service, your understanding was partly organized by fear. You had to know what others felt because their discomfort threatened connection. Now you can remain perceptive without assuming ownership. Perception remains yours, but responsibility returns to the person whose feeling it is. You can understand without disappearing into the work of making everything better. Choice changes the quality of giving. A gesture freely offered does not carry the same hidden exhaustion. You can help without silently hoping the help will guarantee devotion. You can listen without making yourself the only person capable of understanding. You can give generously and still notice when the giving has crossed from affection into the familiar attempt to become irreplaceable. The shadow does not vanish when it becomes visible. There may still be moments when you offer more than you mean to give. You may still feel secretly wounded when no one recognizes the sacrifice they did not request. The difference is that resentment can now be understood before it hardens into distance. It points toward a need that was hidden inside the gift. Naming that need may remain awkward. You may say that you want reassurance, company, or practical help, then feel your face warm as if you have confessed something excessive. The other person may respond simply. They may say yes, explain a limit, or offer a different form of care. None of these responses determines your worth. They reveal what the actual relationship can hold. Even a loving answer may not calm you immediately. You can receive reassurance and still question whether you manipulated someone into giving it. You can accept help and feel the urge to compensate the next morning. The old equation continues speaking. Yet it is no longer the only voice interpreting the exchange, because repeated experience has begun showing that care can survive an honest request. There will also be refusals. Someone you love may be tired, unavailable, or unable to meet a particular need. Mutuality does not protect you from this. What changes is the meaning of the refusal. It no longer has to prove that needing was a mistake. A limit can remain a limit without becoming a judgment on the entire self or a reason to stop asking forever. A human bond becomes flexible enough to survive one unmet moment. This may be one of the hardest capacities to build. When care was earned, refusal felt preventable through greater effort. If you became useful enough, perhaps the answer would change. Direct need removes that fantasy. Another person can love you and still say no. Disappointment becomes something the relationship can contain rather than evidence that the relationship has failed. You begin discovering that receiving includes allowing the giver to remain free. Their care matters precisely because it was chosen. If it had to be extracted through tests or guaranteed through your perfection, it would not carry the same meaning. The uncertainty you once tried to eliminate is part of what makes affection real. Another person could withhold care, yet sometimes they freely remain. The body may still react before this meaning becomes available. A kind message arrives, and your chest becomes careful. Someone notices your fatigue, and your shoulders lift. You accept the gift, then feel the familiar pressure to deserve it afterward. These reactions do not announce failure. They show how deeply the old bargain entered ordinary closeness and how slowly lived evidence changes it. There are days when you return completely to the role. You take over, anticipate, and exhaust yourself before realizing what happened. The awareness may arrive as irritation towards someone who never asked you to carry so much. This recognition is uncomfortable, but useful. It interrupts the belief that your resentment always proves another person demanded what you sometimes volunteered to avoid receiving. On other days, the movement changes by a few seconds. You notice the urge before acting. You ask whether help was requested. You let another adult solve what belongs to them. The released attention returns to your own life, where it may initially find uncertainty rather than desire. The self that was organized around others does not instantly know what to do with recovered space. The pause protects choice without requiring either distance or immediate self-sacrifice. Gradually, preference becomes audible in modest forms. You know which plan you would rather choose. You admit that you are tired before collapse makes the admission respectable. You allow someone else to decide, prepare, carry, or comfort. None of this creates a dramatic new identity. It simply makes room for a person who can participate in love without managing every condition of it. The relationship may become less intense and more intimate. There are fewer emergencies proving how essential you are, but more moments in which you are actually known. Someone sees you uncertain and does not lose respect. They encounter a limit and remain affectionate. They contribute without making you smaller. What once felt like reduced importance begins to reveal itself as shared weight. Through a Jungian lens, this is a movement toward less division. The caring persona does not need to be destroyed. It becomes one capacity among others rather than the entire basis of belonging. The part that gives and the part that needs no longer have to live on opposite sides of the self. Wholeness appears as movement, not as a permanent state of ease. Neither part must disappear for the other to become fully legitimate. You may still grieve the person you had to become. That role carried you through situations in which usefulness was more reliable than tenderness. It deserves understanding, not contempt, but gratitude for an old protection does not require permanent obedience to it. The structure can be honored for what it preserved, while losing the authority to decide what every loving gesture means. Eventually, the ordinary moment returns. Someone cares for you before you have earned it. The tightening still appears, but it is no longer followed immediately by apology, suspicion, or repayment. You remain present long enough to notice the person rather than only the risk. Love has not become certain. Receiving has simply become possible without the self disappearing. The body still tightened, but love no longer required earning.
Hello, I'm John, and I manage the psychoanalysis. Many of you come here seeking language for experience you have carried quietly for years. So I want to be transparent about how this film was made. This is an original essay inspired by Jungian psychology. AI-assisted tools support parts of the narration and visual production, while I personally review and edit every element. This is not archival footage or a lecture by Carl Jung. It is a contemporary interpretation offered for reflection, not therapy or medical advice. Thank you for trusting this space and for being here.